this episode, we are looking at a part of Windows support that seems simple until one small setting turns a normal computer into a frustrating one. Many support problems do not begin with broken hardware or damaged software. They begin with a changed setting, a block permission, a device that is no longer the default choice, or a privacy option that is protecting the user a little too well for the task they are trying to do. That is why technicians need to understand Windows settings in a practical way. They need to know how usability settings affect comfort, how device settings affect daily work, how privacy settings affect access, and how administrative controls protect the system from changes that should not happen casually. The real goal is not to turn every system into the most locked-down machine possible or the most open machine possible. The goal is to help the user work effectively while keeping the computer manageable, safe, and predictable. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at CyberAuthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A beginner should think of Windows settings as a group of choices that shape behavior rather than as a random collection of menus. Some settings are about comfort, such as display size, text size, sound output, and typing behavior. Some settings are about access, such as whether an app can use the camera or microphone. Some settings are about system control, such as who can install software or change important parts of the operating system. Support work becomes much easier when you stop thinking of settings as small details and start seeing them as rules the computer follows every day. When a user says the laptop feels wrong, the audio disappeared, notifications are annoying, or an app cannot use a device, the answer may be sitting in a settings page instead of in a repair shop. That is why technicians need to be comfortable moving through Windows settings with a clear purpose instead of clicking around and hoping the right option appears. Usability settings are often the first place where technicians can help quickly because they affect how comfortable and understandable the system feels to the user. A computer can be technically healthy and still feel almost unusable if the text is too small, the display scaling is wrong, the pointer moves too fast, or the keyboard behavior feels strange. These are not minor complaints. For many users, they shape whether the system feels clear and trustworthy or confusing and exhausting. A beginner should remember that support is not only about fixing failures. It is also about making the machine fit the person using it. Windows includes settings for display size, resolution, text clarity, color comfort, sound balance, and input behavior, and those choices matter a great deal. A user with poor vision, shaky hands, hearing difficulty, or just a strong personal preference may experience the same computer very differently, depending on how these settings are configured. Good technicians treat those settings as part of real support, not as cosmetic extras. Accessibility is part of that same conversation and should be understood as a normal part of usability, not as a rare special case. Features that make text larger, improve contrast, read content aloud, slow down typing speed, or make pointer movement easier can be the difference between a system someone avoids and a system they can use with confidence. This matters in homes, schools, offices, and anywhere people have different comfort levels and physical needs. A beginner does not need to memorize every accessibility tool to understand the big lesson. Windows is built to support different kinds of users, and the technician's job is often to match the machine to the person rather than forcing the person to adapt to whatever settings happen to be their last. That kind of support builds trust very quickly because users feel that the technician actually solved their problem instead of only confirming that the computer still turns on and connects to the network. Device settings are just as important because many support calls that sound like hardware failure are really setup or selection problems. A webcam may appear broken when the real issue is that a different camera is selected. Sound may seem gone when the correct speakers are not set as the active output. A microphone may seem dead when the wrong input device is chosen or when an app is listening to another source. Printers can confuse users in the same way because Windows may still remember an older printer, a virtual printer, or a previous default device that no longer matches what the user wants. For beginners, this is one of the most useful habits to build. Before assuming a device is broken, check whether Windows sees the device, whether it is enabled, whether it is the default choice, and whether the right app is trying to use the right device. That simple check can solve a large number of everyday problems without any hardware repair at all. Wireless devices add another layer because convenience and confusion often arrive together. Headsets, keyboards, mice, speakers, and other accessories are easy for users to connect and disconnect, but that also means Windows may need to remember several device relationships at once. A user may pair a headset one day, switch to another the next day, and then wonder why audio is suddenly coming from the wrong place. A camera or microphone can behave the same way when several options exist, especially on laptops that already include built-in devices. The technician's job is not just to confirm that something paired successfully once. It is to make sure the system is using the device the user actually wants at the moment they need it. That is why device settings matter so much. The device can be present and healthy while the experience still feels broken because Windows is following an old preference, a saved default, or an automatic choice that no longer fits the current task. Privacy settings are another major part of modern Windows support because many features depend on permission before they can work. This is especially clear with the camera, microphone, location, contacts, and other sensitive parts of the system. A beginner should understand that privacy settings are not there to annoy the user. They exist to stop apps from using personal information and sensitive devices without approval. That is a good thing, but it also means a support call may come in that sounds like an app problem when the real issue is a blocked permission. A video meeting app may not be able to use the camera because Windows privacy settings are denying access. A map-based service may not work well because location services are turned off. The key lesson is that technicians should ask whether the app is allowed to use what it needs before assuming the software itself is broken. Privacy protection often explains behavior that looks mysterious until you remember that Windows may be following the user's or the organization's rules exactly as designed. Balancing privacy with usefulness takes judgment because turning everything on is not always the right answer, and turning everything off is not always the right answer either. If every app can use the camera, microphone, and location all the time, the user may lose privacy without realizing it. But if nothing is allowed, important tools may stop working in ways that confuse the user and create support calls. A good technician helps find the middle ground by asking what the user actually needs. Does this app need microphone access to do its job? Does this user really want notifications on the lock screen? Does location access help with the task? Or is it unnecessary? This way of thinking keeps support from becoming automatic permission granting. It also keeps support from becoming rigid refusal. The point is not to pick privacy or convenience as if they are enemies. The point is to decide which settings allow the user to do real work while still respecting safety and personal control. Notifications are another setting area that can either help a user stay organized or make the computer feel noisy and distracting. Too many pop-ups, reminders, banners, and sounds can make users feel that Windows is constantly interrupting them. At the same time, turning notifications down too far can cause users to miss calendar reminders, messages, system warnings, or application alerts that matter. For a beginner, this is a very practical part of support because users often describe the result rather than the cause. One user may say the computer is bothering them all day. Another may say the system never tells them anything important. In both cases, the technician should think about notification settings, app-specific alert choices, and attention management features built into Windows. These settings are not only about comfort. They affect focus, miscommunication, and how much the user trusts the system to surface useful information at the right time instead of flooding them with constant interruptions. System behavior settings matter for the same reason. These are the settings that shape how Windows acts in everyday moments, even when the user is not thinking about them directly. They can determine which app opens a common file type, whether certain programs start when the computer signs in, how the system handles shared content, whether background activity is allowed, and how the desktop responds to basic user actions. When those settings are wrong, the machine can feel unpredictable. A file may open in the wrong program. A user may sign in and suddenly face a crowd of apps launching at once. A laptop may feel cluttered and slow even though nothing major is broken. This is why technicians should pay attention to settings that affect default behavior. Users usually think in terms of what should happen when they click something or sign in, And if Windows is doing something else, the problem may be a simple behavior setting rather than a deeper technical failure. Administrative control becomes very important when you move from personal convenience into system protection. Not every user should be able to change every part of Windows freely. Standard user accounts are helpful because they reduce the risk of accidental damage, unwanted software installation, and unsafe system-wide changes. Administrative access is still necessary for many support tasks, but it should be used deliberately, not casually. This is where user account control, UAC, makes sense for beginners. UAC is the prompt system that asks for approval when something important is about to change. Many users find those prompts annoying, but they serve a real purpose. They slow down risky actions and make the user or technician confirm that a system-level change is intended. A good technician does not treat UAC as a useless obstacle. It is one of the ways Windows separates ordinary daily use from higher-risk changes that affect the whole machine. This is also where technicians have to balance convenience with manageability. A user may ask for full administrative access because they do not want prompts or restrictions, but that does not always lead to a better support experience. If every user can install anything, change any major setting, and disable important protections, the system may become much harder to support over time. Problems can spread faster, settings can drift from one machine to the next, and it becomes harder to know what changed when something stops working. On the other hand, a system that is locked down too tightly can frustrate users and block legitimate work. The technician's job is to find the right level of control for the situation. A family laptop, a small office desktop, and a school computer lab may need very different levels of freedom. Good support means understanding that the right answer depends on who uses the system, what they need to do, and how much risk the environment can tolerate. Managed environments make this even more important because some Windows settings may be there by design and should not be casually undone. In an office or school, a technician may see limits on device access, privacy options, installation rights, or certain system behaviors because the organization wants consistency and lower risk. That can be frustrating for users who only see a blocked action, but from a support point of view, those controls often reduce larger problems. They help make many systems behave in similar ways, which makes troubleshooting easier and keeps one user's choices from creating broad support issues later. A beginner should understand that not every locked setting means Windows is malfunctioning. Sometimes the setting is doing exactly what the environment requires. In those cases, the technician's role is not to break the rule for convenience. The role is to understand the reason for the control, explain it clearly, and find an approved way for the user to keep working. A good troubleshooting method for this topic is to ask a small series of simple questions before changing anything. Is the problem really a hardware failure, or is Windows choosing the wrong device? Is the app blocked by privacy settings? Is the user missing notifications because they were turned off or reduced? Is the behavior tied to a default app or startup setting? Does the action require administrative approval that the user does not have? These questions help turn a vague complaint into a clear category. For example, if a microphone does not work during a video call, the answer could be a mute button, the wrong default input, denied privacy permission, or a blocked app setting. The symptom is only the starting point. Good technicians learn to test the simple Windows rules around the symptom before assuming the most dramatic explanation. That approach saves time and makes support feel much less chaotic. One of the biggest beginner mistakes in this area is treating every request for convenience as automatically reasonable. It is easy to think that turning off prompts, allowing every permission, showing every notification, and giving every user full control will make support easier because users will stop running into barriers. In reality, that often creates a noisier, less secure, and less predictable system. Another common mistake is going too far in the other direction by keeping every control so tight that users cannot do normal work without repeated friction. The better approach is to understand what the user needs, what the system is meant to protect, and what level of change is truly necessary. Convenience is important because users need to get work done. Control is important because unmanaged freedom can create support problems, privacy exposure, and inconsistent behavior. The technician's value comes from balancing those two goals instead of choosing one and ignoring the other. By the end of this episode, the main idea should feel clear. Windows settings for usability, devices, privacy, notifications, system behavior, and administrative control all shape whether a computer feels helpful or frustrating. Usability settings affect comfort and accessibility. Device settings affect whether Windows uses the correct camera, microphone, printer, speakers, and other hardware. Privacy settings decide what apps are allowed to access. Notification and behavior settings affect focus, predictability, and daily workflow. Administrative controls and UAC protect the system from careless or unsafe changes. When technicians understand these settings as connected parts of the user experience instead of separate menus, they can solve problems faster and make better decisions about what to open up, what to restrict, and what to leave alone. That is the real balance in Windows support. Help the user work smoothly, but do it in a way that keeps the system manageable, controlled, and dependable over time.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.